talking about the promise and potential of OER and whether this has been realised is quite an emotional subject for me. When they were first launched, open educational resources were seen as the solution to educational inequity and to the lack of access to quality education, especially in low income countries, that is addressed by Sustainable Development Goal 4. However, this has turned out to be not as straightforward as we in the OER movement had hoped, and a number of research studies have subsequently investigated the issue and have identified quite a lot of barriers to using, adapting, and resharing OER, especially in low income countries. And I think this is both frustrating and really sad, and I'm working to address this in a number of ways. Now, the barriers that were identified were quite numerous and wide ranging. And they include some of the following. Firstly, difficulties in people finding OER relevant to particular geographical and cultural contexts, or appropriate to local teaching styles and preferences, and also in local mother tongue languages. There are also difficulties in people not knowing about OER and not knowing where to find them. People face barriers in having a slow or unreliable internet connection or even no internet connection at all. Similarly, along the same lines, people having out of date computer hardware and software or no computer hardware and software can also be a barrier to realizing the potential of OER. Another barrier is finding OER that are sufficiently good quality or up to date or both. And also thinking about collaboration with colleagues in educational institutions. Another barrier to using OER is lacking connections with other OER using peers. And related to that, colleagues not accepting the use of OER, perhaps not thinking they're going to be of sufficient quality or that they would be relevant to a local context. And in fact, as I'll mention, there is some truth in that some of the time. Another barrier is that people often lack the skills needed for editing OER and also the knowledge about the permissions for doing so, the sorts of licenses that will allow people to adapt OER. People aren't aware of which licenses necessarily can allow them to adapt and reshare. Looking at the sort of slightly bigger picture, limited institutional support for using OER can also be a really big barrier for people wanting to use them in their teaching and also adapt them. Another barrier can be a lack of willingness to create OER and share them freely with others. And this barrier can be a real issue if someone is relying on the sale of their own personal resources to supplement their income. And I found this in my own research that it can be a real barrier. There also can be a reluctance to volunteer time and effort without financial gain. And this is a particularly pressing issue in resource poor settings where people have to work very long hours to support their families. And producing a resource for no financial gain can seem particularly unappealing. So, what's the solution? Well, I think it's fairly simple, but it does require, a lot of effort. The solution, I think, is getting more people involved in creating and adapting OER that are relevant for their own local contexts or which are presented in their own languages. And this will help unlock the power of OER and to shift the focus away from countries such as the US and the UK, producing resources that are then pushed to low income countries without thoughts of the needs of the people most likely to benefit from OER. It also sees a shift of focus towards working alongside local people in producing OER that are really relevant, that meet people's needs, and also training people to adapt existing OER themselves. And I think that this isn't a straightforward and easy endeavour, but it's vital if we really are to unlock the potential of OER that was first imagined as the OER movement was in its early years.